Joining us now, Hawaii Congresswoman and Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard. She's back on the campaign trail after 2 weeks of active duty. She was serving in Indonesia on a joint training exercise with the Hawaii branch of the National Guard. And she's joining us from Des Moines, Iowa. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Elaine. It's good to be back.
So before we turn back to your deployment, I wanted to first of all get your reaction to this news that Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is dropping out of the race.
She's made the decision for herself and her campaign, and I wish her well and know she'll find ways to continue to serve.
Will you seek her endorsement?
Of course.
And what ways do you find that your philosophy aligns with hers?
Senator Gillibrand and I have worked together on a number of issues specifically related to veterans as well as victims of sexual assault in the military. We've worked well together on these issues and focused on how we can best move these issues forward to serve the American people.
Let's talk about your deployment. What about that experience in Indonesia are you taking back with you to the campaign trail?
Yeah, it was a great experience to be there to work with my fellow service members from both the Hawaii Air and Army National Guard as well as our Indonesian military counterparts. And what we were actually doing in that training exercise was very relevant to what we are facing in our country. Important for military operations is having a problem-solving mindset, making sure that before you begin an operation, you understand the current situation, you define the problem that you're facing, and then you identify a clear, achievable objective that you can accomplish. Now, we can look how that can and must be applied across our foreign policy as well as our domestic policy. And we also understand that when you fail to exercise these fundamental principles, then you end up with situations like we've seen in Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, and Syria, where you either have no goal or no objective, or you have an unrealistic objective. And, this is personal for me and very relevant because I look back to my experience serving in that medical unit in Iraq, where we went in, our country went in without really any clear, achievable objective that our troops were meant to go in and accomplish and then get out. As a result, we've seen this protracted war. We've seen so many of my brothers and sisters needlessly lose their lives in this war as a result of leaders in our country failing to exercise these fundamental principles of a problem-solving mindset. So what we were doing in that training exercise in Indonesia just these past couple of weeks directly applies to the kind of leadership that I'll bring as president, to bring this problem-solving mindset, not looking through a partisan lens, but really recognizing the challenges that we face, both with domestic and foreign policy, identifying those clear, achievable objectives, and then bring people together to solve these challenges we're facing.
I know you talk about this in very personal terms, your commitment to serving in the military, but I wonder if you feel like you lost any ground at all in the campaign by leaving for 2 weeks.
I don't know. It wasn't what was on my mind, to be honest with you. I'm back. I'm glad to be back, bringing the experiences that I've had back with me. And I'm grateful to all of our supporters who've been working really hard over the few weeks that I was gone and came straight back here to Iowa and will be hitting the trail.
Yeah, what are your plans there in Iowa?
We've got a number of events planned here in Iowa over the next couple of days. Headed to Georgia, where we'll be doing a few events there, followed by a visit to New Hampshire, and so on and so on.
So today was the deadline, as you know, to qualify for the September Democratic debate. And if things hold as expected, you will not be on the stage in Houston because you did not get 2% in 4 DNC-approved polls. What's your reaction to that?
Would like to have been on that stage, but that's not everything. And we're going to find ways to work around it and really focus on bringing our people-powered campaign directly to the people, connecting directly with voters, and continuing to do exactly what we have been doing in building and growing the momentum that we're seeing and the interest and support for the kind of leadership that I seek to bring.
What's your assessment of how the DNC did in selecting the polls that would be eligible?
I think the biggest problem with this whole process has been a lack of transparency in not being very clear and open with the people and the public on why certain polls were qualifying while others were disqualifying, even when some of the qualifying polls were less accurate than the ones that the DNC said were not qualifying. So I think transparency is the biggest issue that I think people are looking to the DNC to address, but also it points to the bigger issue, really the lack of trust that people have in their government as a whole. You know, people expect that their leaders and their leadership will be a government of, by, and for the people. And instead, what they feel too often is that there's kind of a small group of really powerful people in the establishment, and then everyone else is left out or left behind. So to me, whether we're talking about the DNC or we're talking really about the bigger challenge in our government, this is what's at the heart of the change in leadership that I seek to bring, to make it so that it is transparent and a government that is truly focused on being for the people.
If you fail to qualify for the October debates, will you stay in the race?
We're going to continue to work to qualify, but again, I am staying in this race, and whether we're in the debates or we're not in the debates, there are many other ways that we can continue to reach voters, and that's exactly what I'm focused on doing.
Earlier this month, you told our political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns that you would support the Democratic nominee if you end up not winning the primary. Is there any policy a Democratic nominee could hold that would persuade you not to endorse them in the general election?
No, I am, as are all of the other candidates that I'm aware of running for president, committed to defeating Donald Trump in 2020. I look forward and hope to be able to earn that nomination myself, but if not, then I'll join with others in making sure that that happens.
Well, you're facing a primary challenge back in your district, Hawaii's second, and it was reported that your campaign was in the red for the second quarter of 2019. If you don't win the Democratic nomination, will you try and return to the House?
Yeah, once again, I'm focused on bringing my presidential campaign to the people and bringing this message to them of a government of, by, and for the people, and recognizing that the most important responsibility the president has is commander-in-chief. I bring a unique skill set of experiences, both, yes, as a soldier, but really as a member of Congress, serving for nearly 7 years on the Foreign Affairs Committees, the Armed Services Committees, Homeland Security Committees, that make me equipped, able, and ready to walk in on day one to fulfill that responsibility as commander-in-chief. We have been wasting far too long, both American lives, my brothers and sisters in uniform, as well as trillions of taxpayer dollars on these senseless regime change wars. As president, I'm going to end these regime change wars, work to end this new Cold War, and bring this focus back on dedicating our resources to serving the American people. So I'm going to continue to focus on bringing that message to the American people and to voters and providing them with a choice in who they want to serve as their commander-in-chief.
As we speak, Hurricane Dorian is currently churning in the Caribbean. You were in Puerto Rico recently during the protest against then Governor Ricardo Rosselló. As president, how would you approach Puerto Rico differently than the current administration?
In every way, differently than the current administration.
Would you be in favor
just
of Puerto Rican statehood?
As we were flying into, I want to just address the hurricane that I think has just passed them by, but it's a threat that continues to concern them. As we were flying in to Puerto Rico, I was looking out the window of the airplane that probably half of the homes and buildings that we were flying over still had blue tarps on their rooftops, which just points to the fact that the people of Puerto Rico are still recovering from the last major hurricane that they faced and are now in imminent threat as the other hurricanes continue to pose a threat to them. So I think we see a deep-seated issue that we pointed out the last time I spoke to you about corruption within the Puerto Rican government that has done such a great disservice to the people of Puerto Rico. They are standing up and working towards bringing about that change in their own leadership. From a federal perspective, we need to be able to dedicate the kinds of resources necessary to be able to help Puerto Rico begin to rebuild in a way that is sustainable and long-lasting. Would
you be in favor of Puerto Rican statehood?
That's for the Puerto Rican people to decide. If the people of Puerto Rico decide that that's the direction that they want to take, then I would support that.
Very quickly, in our final minute, you've been called the most anti-war candidate in the 2020 race. Are there any U.S. wars that you would continue to fight as president?
the war against al-Qaeda and ISIS, these terrorist groups that continue to pose a threat to the safety and security of the American people, whether it is a terrorist entity or another country. If you directly threaten the American people, then that is a threat that we need to address. However, my strong stance has been against these counterproductive regime change wars that have been counter to our national security interests. They've strengthened terrorist groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda. They have taken thousands of my brothers and sisters in uniforms' lives, and they have cost the American people dearly. Every time we hear about people in Flint being poisoned by their water, there's news of more communities and children being poisoned by lead in their water. This is a direct failure of not dedicating our resources towards our health and well-being of our people and instead squandering them on these wasteful regime change wars. This is why I'm running for president, to bring about this sea change in our foreign policy so we can put the American people first.
Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Elaine.